Councilmember Castle.
Present.
Dean. Deputy Mayor Katz.
Here.
Councilmember Pruitt. Councilmember Schwartz.
Here.
Councilmember Stone.
Here.
Mayor Parker.
Here.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by Resolution Number 137-2014, setting the 2014 meeting dates, and Resolution Number 154-2014, and Sunshine Notice dated July 17, 2014, amending the 2014 meeting dates, sending a copy to the record and the Jewish Standard, filing a copy in the Township Clerk's Office, and posting it on the Municipal Building Bulletin Board, and the Mayor hereby directs that this statement be included in the minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for coming to tonight's special meeting. Also present with us is the Township Manager, William Broughton, Township Clerk, Jamie Evelina, and Senior Clerk, who is not here right now, Colleen Hannigan, as well as William Rupp from the law firm of Winnie Banta. The next televised council meeting will take place on Tuesday, July 29th, with legal opening to begin at 7 p.m. and public input to begin at 8 p.m. The next emergency preparedness seminar will be held on 7 p.m. Thursday, August 7th at the Teaneck Police Headquarters, 900 Teaneck Road. Council met in closed session to discuss the following matters: interviews for Planning Board, Board of Adjustment. On Tuesday, August 5th at Votee Park will be National Night Out, and the start time is?
Approximately 6 p.m.
6 p.m. And tonight is a very, very, very special evening, and I'd just like it if we could just sing happy birthday to Dr. Henry Pruitt, Councilman, who is celebrating his 80th birthday with us this evening, tonight. So let's sing. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dr. Pruitt. Happy birthday to you.
What a nice surprise. Thank you very much. And all those people in television land, thank you also.
And we thank you for continuing to serve the residents of Teaneck. We have two amendments to resolutions this evening. Resolution B is to table the vote for Monica Honus until Tuesday, August 12th. And amendment to Resolution C to table the vote for Keith Kaplan to August 12th as well. I make a motion that these votes be tabled, and I need a second.
Second, but can I ask you to explain why those nominations?
The votes are being tabled because they were not available for interviews this evening, and the new council members did not have an opportunity to interview them.
Okay. Roll call. Councilmember Castle.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Katz. Councilmember Pruitt.
Yes.
Councilmember Schwartz.
Yes.
Councilmember Stone.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. We will now open up the meeting for good and welfare. This is your opportunity to talk about anything that concerns you. We will be discussing the budget tonight, so if you have any budget concerns, we ask you to address us at this time as well. Good and welfare is now open. Nobody? Dr. Powers? Well, no. Former Councilwoman Toffler. Well, he raised his hand first, but ladies first. Come on up.
Dr. Barbara Toffler, Teaneck. First of all, I want to use this opportunity. I didn't do it on July 1st, which is to congratulate Lizette Parker as mayor, as our first African-American mayor, as our, I believe, only second female mayor. And what? Third? Who else?
Jackie.
Oh, Jackie. Oh, my gosh. Third, Eleanor Kilachek, Jackie Cates, Lizette Parker. I apologize.
And
Either Jackie or Eleanor. I'm not sure what I was thinking. And I look forward to seeing many, many more. This is sort of, in a way, a personal statement to Lizette, with all kinds of warm feelings and love, because Lizette and I spent a lot of time as very, very, very close friends. And I think there was a time when we talked to each other practically every day and almost couldn't survive if we didn't. What I find so extraordinary, and I'm going to try not to get emotional. I mean, obviously, 4 years ago, I hoped this was going to happen, and I was the only person on the council who did support Lizette, and I believe she should have been mayor 4 years ago. But I feel, Lizette, that right now is an extraordinary time that I'm not sure that I envy you, but I want to be in every way a support for you, as I think so many other people do in Teaneck. You have a huge, huge challenge facing you. You have, as you have often talked about, standing on the shoulders of others, which indeed you have. But now there are many who want to stand on your shoulders. Many of us who are not looking to stand on your shoulders to be, on boards or to achieve things, but to experience the town that we know that Teaneck can be. And I want to put my full support behind you in every way that I can. Maybe someday we'll be talking to each other every day on the phone again, which would be really wonderful. But I just want to acknowledge for everyone that that you have an amazing challenge, an amazing opportunity. I'm trying to think of, and I don't want to get it wrong, but I know in Chinese there is a certain character, and it means both crisis. It means crisis, and it stands for both risk and opportunity. I think I got that right this time. And that's sort of what you face. But you are the embodiment of the future for many of us. So I just want to wish you all the very best. I think you have a council that is now going to be amazingly supportive of you. Happy birthday, Dr. Pruitt, by the way. He was a member of that council to be so supportive. And I don't want to be flipped by saying I'll talk to you, but I mean that. And you just have all my good wishes and all the hopes that we all have.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Perhaps we could schedule dinner at Amaran's. Dr. Powers.
Excuse me, Mayor. I just need to make a correction to National Night Out. National Nights Out on August 5th starts at 5 p.m. and ends at 9 p.m. So it's 5 to 9 p.m.
Thank you.
Chuck Powers, Teaneck. I'm going to go ahead and sort of build on what Dr. Toffler just talked about. I think it's an exciting thing that in your first meeting you decided that rather than simply introduce a budget and then race toward going ahead and approving a budget, that you took the time to give yourselves the time, but more also give the public time to know what it is that you're doing with this budget. I think you know that this township has experienced enormous escalation in its taxation. And it's very worrisome that that's happening, and somehow a lot of the folks around us are managing not to have to see huge escalations in related budgets, even the county budget. And I think that there was a message in part of the vote that occurred in this last election that says we at least need to take very substantial look at what it is that is driving those accelerated costs and talk to the public about why it is that we can't either achieve the same level of service as we had before, or because there's no way to cut, or there are ways, in fact, to get the same service, perhaps by using the public who are expert about some of these questions in a much more active way. I hope you will figure out a way to do that. And beginning tonight, I don't understand why there's $807,000 in something called uncollected expenses, unexpended expenditures in a budget that used to not have that number at all in it. We need to understand, has something to do with what you did on December 31st? Can the auditor explain that, or can the CFO explain that? What is it that's going on in those figures? How are those issues related to where we are in the surplus and whether or not we are spending down that surplus and what's happening with our trust funds and the whole range of other questions where you do have some discretion, I think, so talk to us about what it is that you're doing today in this extraordinary opportunity you've made for yourself of talking to the public about the budget before you move toward approval. Thank you for doing that. I'm also concerned that you build on what you began last time, which is answering most of the questions that people asked from the floor. You didn't answer one. I'd ask you to find out the answer to it, although with the absence of the principal attorney may make it more difficult. I don't understand how it is that you can have a township code that specifies that you have an attorney for a 2-year period and give him or the firm a 1-year contract. I think I understand why the attorney might want to do that, because it isn't a no-bid contract, and I believe the state law specifies you can't have more than 1 year in a no-bid contract that exceeds $17,000 as a contract per se, even though there are ways in which you can extend it. You need to tell us, if you don't know yourselves, if you do know yourselves, good. If you don't, to find out why it is that a code that says 2 years allows you to appoint an attorney for only 1 year. And it may be that in the course of thinking through that, there may be ways of thinking through what it is that the township is paying for legal services as well. You're setting a new path. Special meetings, happy to say that they're televised. I hope you can televise them on the 29th as well. If you can't, I'll get a camera in here and we'll get it up on the web. But the issue of making the public part of the process, which is what the state said was so important in what it was that you folks raced to do last week, are things that I hope you can continue as you begin to change the ethos of your own meetings and on the way to doing what Barbara was talking about in terms of the ethos of the entire township. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Rose?
Howard Rose, resident. I guess coming into this new council, I'm a bit more optimistic, because I could never understand how 7 adults and a manager in a 6-month period couldn't come up with a better budget for the township after so much time. To reduce a budget of this size, $70 million or so, by $400,000 after 6 months of back and forth and argumentation and pleas from members of the community, it's difficult to understand. I'm hopeful that with this new council, and I hope nothing's wrong with Mohammed, having not seen him for 2 meetings. I hope it's a vacation. At any rate, I'm hopeful that we'll have 7 people here who are so much more collaborative, that they will get from point A to point B expeditiously, and that they will do so to the great benefit of the residents of the township. And obviously one of the most important things to the residents is the budget, and that budget not tax us so much that we deplete our wallets. So it's up to you, and I know you have the ability, I know you have the desire, I hope you have the will. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nikki?
Okay. Mickey Chelan, resident Teaneck. I just have one question. I've been a resident here about 41 years, and I work a lot with seniors. And one of the big questions, of course, is the fact that the property taxes constantly go up and up and up. And I was wondering, people suggested, can't we hire somebody to really go over this town and check to see, in comparison to other towns, what we are spending our money on? And if there is a way to cut things that are going on. I think it would be cheaper if we spent the money on hiring somebody from the outside. This way nobody could be blamed if we cut something that they don't like. And And really, that's it, because people coming into this town look at the property taxes that we're paying, and it makes it a little more difficult to sell your house. And that's it, as I said. I cover the seniors, and that's their biggest complaint, is that every year property taxes just keep going up and up. And we got to find a way to cut something without cutting services, and check with other towns to see if they're getting the same services and it's costing them less money. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Forensic audit. Forensic audit.
Mr. Rasheen? Dr. Rasheen, rather.
It's interesting that actually we were not given any kind of notes to look through what are the suggestions by the members of the council on cutting taxes, and that's one, tax levy, and on cutting budget. There are two numbers. Actually, neither Englewood nor Ridgewood claim that they cut or kept fixed tax levy. They say that they froze budget, and these are two different things. So now the thing is, and it comes to something which was not supported by and I understand it should be on the website, should be, just we can prepare and look at it, and I hope it will be ready before a week or something before the next meeting, so we can look and suggest, guys, you should do something, because original budget of January or December, disappears from the website, and from the website disappear a lot of things, appendices in the codes, nothing's there. They're not in the library, a lot of things to talk about. But let's go back to the budget. Page 11 of the original budget gives a vacant, 100,000 for police officers, 400,000 for civilian dispatchers and all that. So these are 5 points. These 5 points are $635,000. Even if to give 2 police dispatchers to the police department and 1 public laborer, so that would be $635 saving. I do not understand why we are talking about 400 and all this stuff, all these peanuts, So now the new park rangers, So again, it was discussed, and I mentioned, and Mohammed said that it was considered park rangers, $70,000. What for? Put their camera, let 1 dispatcher police department look at it, and if anything happens, really, send police car. We don't need rangers for that. As for, just looking that something is not vandalized during the events, we have so many lovers of sports, they can oversee it and tell, guys, if you would just vandalize anything, you are not here for the next time. So, assistant construction official, $75,000. Why do we need that? We do so much unnecessary construction, and basically this particular budget year, we don't need to do anything, So, it's another $75,000. So total, it looks from my simple calculations, it's $780,000 here only. So, and because again, this is giving extra hiring this year, this budget year. I'm not talking about next one. To have a bit more time to think and to see what's possible to do. This year, to hire new employees this year, no. It was reasonably suggested last time to put the total freeze, and Mark Schwartz did not support it. He gave a reason that if, for example, police officers will have to do something, will be overtime. I heard that overtime, basically, the police department is exhausted already. So it's not So, and I'm sorry, maybe I hit it, So the thing is, again, cut everything that we can cut. Now, about the capital budget, improvement budgets, bonds, which are there. The thing is that I mentioned one thing which our just anniversary, okay, supported, that we should see how to raise standards first before we do anything, because we'll spend money for low quality materials. And our lawyers said that, oh no, with the sidewalks on Cedar Lane, it was cure, it's not the quality and all stuff. First of all, we have other things. We have the plaza, little plaza walkway to the municipal building. It decays within 2 years. Okay, we have the metal along rails, which just
Thank you, Dr. Rasheen.
I'll finish sentence. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Rasheen.
Excuse me. I'll finish sentence. It's unpolite. Okay. So all right. So which are low quality. My rails don't do that. We have to do that.
Thank you, Dr.
And do not
Rasheen.
spend money and do uglification as it is now with the police building.
Would anyone else like to address the council? Good and welfare is now closed. Do any council members have any comments? I would ask that we try to limit our comments so that we can deal with the agenda items that we have to go through. Councilman Castle?
Yes. Before we begin, I want to thank my fellow council colleagues. My first request as a council person was that we could have a special meeting before the public at our last meeting, this one and the next, and I appreciate you accommodating that request because I think it's important that we have input from the public as we're working on a budget this late in the year. In regard to Dr. Powers, I'll be asking that same question this evening about $807,000 worth of unexpended appropriations. It was a big question mark for me as well, how we went from zero to $350 and then now $807,000. So I'll ask that question. Mr. Rose, I too am optimistic about the makeup of the current council. I'm optimistic because as a freshman council person to be able to make a request about a budget, and now we're having open sessions, at least two, I think that we are on the right path forward. Mickey, I would say that it is incredible. It is possible for us to hire people, but hopefully we've started to elect people who are going to look at the budget with maybe a fine-tooth comb and be able to make recommendations. So I think that we collectively as a council will be able to do that, and I think that tonight is a testament to that. Dr. Rasheen, I read the same article you did about Inglewood freezing the budget. I'm in favor of us freezing spending, and I'm in favor of us freezing spending simply because I think that it's unfair to the taxpayers that we experience increases on adopted budgets as opposed to on what we actually spent the previous year. So if we adopt a budget that says we're going to spend $70 million and we only spend $68 million, an increase to the taxpayer should not be on the $70 million, it should be on what we actually spent. And I think there are some ways that we can probably work that in. So I appreciate your comments, and that's all I've got. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other?
I'll just make a few brief comments. I think tonight's meeting. I got to get a new one here. We discussed, Mickey, thank you for your comments, and the seniors are obviously something a very sensitive topic in terms of what they can afford, but one thing I wanted to point out, we pointed out at prior meetings, and I'll keep my comments short, but the purpose of the entire meeting is about this, is we do offer a tremendous amount to the seniors that other towns don't offer, and at a certain point we'll have to start evaluating what do we want and what don't we want. Do our seniors want the Rhoda Center in Boston, which I think I do, or do they want to have reduced some of that increase? So I think we other than Dr. Rasheen and one or two other speakers, very few people have come up to me and said, this is what I want to cut. And I have to commend Dr. Rasheen. When he says something, he backs it up with what he wants to cut, and there's some very good things we'll discuss. But most people want to just have it and not see any cuts. And I think the same speaks for our police and our fire. We want to make more money. We want to have raises in our jobs, but the biggest driver behind this budget is the salaries and, of course, the fringe benefits like the health. Health we can't afford, and our police and they go home every night. They have expenses to fill, and they have a sub 2% contract increase. And I think in some ways they deserve that as well. I mean, we have very few increases for years. We have to start saying what do we want to get rid of and what don't we? And it's something no one has really come up to me and said. And I think the reason they haven't said it is because people don't want anything. They don't want, the seniors don't want that cut. The homeowners don't want this cut. No one wants anything cut. They just don't want one. And now we have to either say give or take. We take it away or they give more. And they is us. We give more. So I commend Dr. Rasheen again for those ideas, some of which I hopefully can implement. And that's my comment.
Just let me start with Dr. Toffler. As it turns out, and you can check Snopes.com, there are a couple of other websites you can probably look at, the myth that there is a single symbol or a pair of symbols that mean crisis and opportunity in Japanese is a myth. However, we have a crisis and we have an opportunity. That crisis is very, very real. And I think if we face that, if we acknowledge the issue, if we recognized Rahm Emanuel's doctrine, don't let a good crisis go to waste, okay, we should look at this crisis and recognize that we need to make changes. And we do have opportunities for collaboration, as Mr. Rose had pointed out. And I think if we benchmark, if we start looking at how are other municipalities doing it better, as Mickey's pointed out, and if we look at Dr. Powers has said at where are we spending? Where is this money going? And I do have significant questions looking through the budget. We will ask some of these to, we don't have the CFO here. I will certainly ask Mr. Garbarini about some more details about canceled expenditures. But we've seen steadily declining surplus. We're just consistently, year after year, spending more money than we have. Many of these positions in the budget are basically designed to be vacant. They are designed to be not filled so that we can carry that money over to surplus. And we need to go through these, gain a better understanding of what is in that budget, what are the positions that we need, and how to evaluate that as part of the budget going forward. I think with that, I will also point out, Dr. Rasheen, that the 2014 manager's introduced budget is not only available in this book, and I think the manager has a special copy just for you and for the entire audience, but it is available on the website under the Finance Department, Documents and Forms, and Budget. And if you click on that budget tab, all the budget information for this current year that has been submitted, including the 2014 municipal data sheet and the full presentation, are all available online. I can assure you, and I have checked that and verified that.
And it's available in the library as well.
Thank you for your comments. I don't want to belabor the point, but as it's already been stated, we are a full-service community. We have full service for our seniors as well as our youth, as well as service to our residents as well. And it's a tough balancing act when you talk about cutting, because once you say we're going to cut one area, this council chambers is packed with whatever that constituency that says, please don't cut this service. So it's a tough act, but tonight we're going to take a step at trying to cut whatever we can to provide as much relief to the taxpayer. With that said,
I just want to add to something that was said in Good and Welfare. One of the things that we have done is we commissioned a study called the Government Services Index. And that Government Services Index did look at the certain costs of municipalities, contiguous municipalities, Inglewood, Hackensack, Pagoda, and it looked at the costs. And one of the things that came out of it is that Teaneck residents enjoy a lower per capita cost for services than these other municipalities. And that report is available online on the website.
Thank you for that, Mr. Manager. I would like to call up the auditor at this time.
And just want to add, the budget is also on the bulletin board as well as the library, the introduced budget.
How long is your presentation?
It's totally up to you all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Would you like to begin?
Sure. I'll give an overview as I did last week. As you know, once a year, we're engaged to audit the financial statements of the township. Our auditing standards are outlined for us by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, by government auditing standards, and by the State of New Jersey Division of Local Government Services. The document that you see before you is pretty much a standard document. The format of that document is standardized so that most municipalities can be compared from one to the other. And there's not a lot of deviation that we're entitled to do to make the document look much different. And the reason why they do that is to keep it a standardized document, and so there's comparison between municipalities. Does anybody have any specific questions?
Sure.
Or?
We'll open up the floor for council members to ask questions. Dr. Pruitt?
A couple of questions. We're looking at the audit report as we are talking now. The public may not have that. And my observation is that the township is reasonably well managed, but we have some deficiencies, and you listed 4 of them in your recommendations section. And I'm not that concerned about the 4 recommendations that you made, but I am concerned that some of them have occurred in past years. And having administered some other things over time, I want to ask the manager whether or not the people who have continued to have those deficiencies have had those deficiencies listed in their evaluation plan at the end of the year.
All right. Let's look at the first one, finding 13-01. All funds shall be deposited within 48 hours of receipt. This is an incident that happened in the audit examination. It was found that in the fire department, through their testing, that a check wasn't deposited within 48 hours of receipt. This type of item would not normally be placed in someone's evaluation. Once we have the audit report, and I will be discussing this with the fire department. I haven't discussed this with them yet, but the CFO has taken corrective action and done some training as well, so that the staff knows to deposit these checks, meaning turn them over to the finance department within 48 hours. She's done training. She's taken corrective action already. But this isn't an item that, not depositing a check would not normally go into someone's evaluation. And this isn't something that happens all the time. I mean, there's various reasons for why a check might not be deposited, might go an extra day. It has to do with the way the mail may be delivered to a particular office, the time they open the mail, the day they open the mail. There's a lot of circumstances surrounding it, but generally these checks are usually deposited in a timely fashion.
Yeah, I don't want to have a discussion with the manager at this point, but if the items that we're talking about were insignificant, then they wouldn't have been mentioned in the recommendations category from the auditor. And some of them are very specific. And it just seems like, you want to work here, we don't want to see that next year. Is that something that can be kind of more emphasized? Because it bothers me. I've seen 3 audits, and I think one of the things has been in all 3 of them. And I I don't think that needs to be in it anymore. So whatever we can do.
Let me just add to that. Now, there are checks that come in to several departments in the town, or several departments receive money, they receive checks. There's checks coming in at the police department, checks at the DPW, checks at the fire department, checks at the recreation center, checks here in the municipal building, the health department, tax office, building department. Do I think it will ever get to the point where no one will ever miss submitting a check within 48 hours? I don't know that we'll ever get there. One of the things I'm happy about is that all checks were deposited. So we're not losing deposits. We just got to do a better job at making sure that all of the checks are being deposited in 48 hours. So the positive is that we're not losing money, that this money is still being deposited, it's not being lost.
Mr. Manager, just as much as I would like your explanation, I'd like to know from the auditor why it found its way into the report. Because if you found it significant enough to be in the report, maybe there were some steps that led up to that. So can you just kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. Again, if you look into last year's, as was mentioned, the findings of last year are on page 38. And as you'll see, as the manager mentioned, last year it was the health department that had a few checks that weren't deposited within 48 hours. The 48-hour rule, let's call it, is actually a state statute. And there's a reason why it's in place. So we don't really have the luxury of deciding whether it's a good law or a bad law. It's the law. And it has to be in the bank in 48 hours. So last year it was a problem in the health department, and that department has been rectified. And then this year the problem was in the fire department, and I'm assuming what the manager says is correct, that will be rectified this year. So I guess that if it was a one-time incident in one department in our testing, I think I mentioned at the last meeting that we started our testing in November. So the process goes November, December, then we come back in May and finish up the testing. So we're doing a sample throughout the year and in all the departments. The positive that you can take from this is that 99% of the other departments are depositing all their checks within 48 hours. Last year it was the health department that had a few instances, and this year it was the fire department. So I hope that's sufficient. If you need more explanation, I don't.
My question would be for the manager. Is it some way that we could get a correspondence out to maybe all the departments, so that next year it's not the fire department, it's the police department, or just so that everybody's on the same page?
That's something we've already done. We've already done the training. We do everything we can to make sure that these checks get deposited within 48 hours.
It's an internal control that has been put in place for many years. It has some meaning. It has a statute behind it. And our goal is to get 100% of perfection. And, again, when we come in the fall this year, we will do the same tests, and we'll make any recommendations to any departments that need to be done.
Are you able to speak to the $807,000 worth of unexpended appropriations, and just kind of the course that's followed with $350 and then a huge increase to $807,000?
Sure, yes. At the end of every year, the chief financial officer and the manager have some discretion on what appropriations that were set in the budget are allowed to be brought forward to the next year. So it's called appropriation reserves. These appropriations are allowed to be transferred to the next year. So if a bill comes in, an invoice comes in December, after the year is closed, like towards the end of the year, and the bill won't be paid until January or February for whatever reason. So the expense was incurred in December, but the actual invoice wasn't received until January or February. they are by law allowed to pay that invoice and charge it to that proper budget appropriation. The most common ones are insurance. A large invoice that'll come in for the month of December, which will be paid in the following year. That's the common rationale for the term appropriation reserve. It's a reserve for appropriations for the prior year. In this particular case, these appropriations were canceled. The manager and the CFO made the decision that they decided that they were not going to need that leeway in those categories. Canceled the appropriation, and it goes directly to fund balance or surplus.
And I can add to that.
And excuse me, Manager. And eventually, that appropriation reserve, whatever that balance would have been left over that wasn't spent, commonly is also canceled to fund balance or surplus. So it's just an acceleration of the process because they had the knowledge they weren't going to need those funds.
And specifically, the bulk of the cancellation was the action we took in December of 2013 to cover the tax appeals. We received those tax appeals very late, those tax appeal judgments very late in 2013, and we needed to ensure that there was enough funding there in that budget to pay for those tax appeals to cover the cost. So that was the bulk of the cancellation.
Just so I'm clear, so the $630,000 that was on December 31st that we had a meeting about, was that $630,000 part of the $807,000?
Yes. Yes.
And that money, which was earmarked for other purposes, salaries for employees that weren't hired, that was carried forward so that we could pay the tax assessment appeals. We basically took it from...
So we canceled it so that it could be used, then for that purpose. So we cancel it so we can use it for that purpose, so it would go into our surplus and not go into the budget year of 2015.
In canceling it, and this, for me, this is a really important question. If we know how much we spent at the end of last year, and then we propose a budget this year, are the increases in the budget based on what was approved by the council, or are the increases in the budget based on what we actually spent? And I'll rephrase it. We allocated, 69, well, the township allocated $69 million last year. That was approved. This year, the number is $71 million. Is the 2% increase, or the increase, based on the $69 million, or is it based on the $66 million that we actually spent last year?
It's based on the $69 million, our best estimate of what we believe we're going to spend, or what we will need to spend. So the variable is the tax appeals. We have an estimate on what we believe those tax appeal judgments may be, but the only time we know exactly what they're going to cost is the day that we receive them from the county. We don't, very early in the year when we're budgeting, we have a possible estimate of what they may cost. But when they get here, that's when we got to make sure that we have enough money. And the whole budget process of last year and the past few years has been a tax appeal judgment story. We would not have this issue if we did not have those tax appeal judgments to pay. $2.5 million, $2.7 million additional added to our budget. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have this problem. And a decreasing rateable base. That is what is driving the tax rate up and increasing the taxes for residents. A significant part of it.
The only thing that's not, and I forgive the question, but this is why we're here. If we spent $66 million, roughly $500,000 this year, and we return $2.5 million of the $4 million that we borrowed from surplus back to surplus, if we know our spending was $66.5 roughly, what makes up the $5 million differential for what we're asking for this year? Because as I've gone back and looked at previous years, whether it was last year or the year prior, we've been underspending, right? We've been spending more than we're taking in, so we're spending into our surplus, which is why it's going down. But if we know we only spent $66,500,000 last year, what do we think we're going to spend $5 million on to get us to 71? Because that in and of itself is a huge buffer based on what we spent and what we're asking for.
All of those items, all of the things that you're talking about are in this particular budget. And I have a list. I can go down the list of why we created a budget that has a tax levy increase of 3.62%. Everything's laid out in the budget, and we can discuss it and go down the list of why it needs to be budgeted in this fashion. Very often in the budget, you're going to see items that we don't get an opportunity to spend the money for various reasons. One of the things is the dispatchers. That money hasn't been spent for a reason. It's not that we don't intend to spend it. I'm thankful that we didn't spend it so that we could add it to surplus, so we don't have a budget problem or a significant budget shortfall. But the dispatchers is something the council decided on. We decided that we would go a different route and get the fire officers or the firefighters off the dispatch desk and get them back onto the fire truck. So we understood that in consolidating our dispatch in the police department, that we would need to have additional staff to cover the additional position for dispatcher that would be required. We would need 3 dispatchers per shift instead of having 2. In the interim, we looked at the county. We looked at having the county take over dispatch for the township. Now, it hasn't been very easy to get cost information from the county on what they would charge us for doing our dispatch. We finally did receive those numbers, and now we're waiting to make a decision. Is that what we really want to do? What do we think about the service? Is there going to be some sort of diminishment of the service that our residents are used to being provided? So we're looking at it. The council's going to be taking a trip up there to look at the dispatch center, but that money's sitting there in case it needs to be used for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. If we could keep our questions geared towards the auditor and keep budgetary questions for the manager when we deal with the budget discussions.
I thought that they were intertwined since you audited our finances and we were...
But you asked them a specific question about the increase, which the manager would need to address because the auditor is not involved in the budgeting process in terms of a recommended budget. Do you have any other questions?
As far as the recommendations go, I think they're pretty clear-cut. Piggybacking on what Dr. Pruitt had said, if they make it into the audit, then they seem to be somewhat significant if you put them there. Is there anything that you can shed light on that was maybe not necessarily a cause for concern? It wasn't as important enough to be in one of your recommendations, but something that you may have seen where we can improve?
There's always recommendations that we make during the course of our audit. We make them to either the departments, as far as if somebody needs help reconciling a bank statement. We make recommendations all the time, and if you notice, there is a finding in there with the municipal court. And really, as I tell the manager and the CFO and mayors and councils of all my clients, what it really comes down to is a cost-benefit. What are you willing to spend to prevent any of these findings from being in the audit? Because there is a cost to it. There's a cost to adding personnel in departments. There's a cost to checks and balances by having another person oversee that department. And it is important to have these checks and balances, but it's also important to look at the cost. And these are the decisions that need to be made by the mayor and council. What costs? How much are you willing to spend? How many employees are you willing to add to basically obtain this perfection in checks and balances. Because, as I said, some of these findings are preventable, but there might be an added person that needs to be put in place to prevent them. And that's really where we need to go. But consistently throughout the audit, we make suggestions, we make recommendations, most of which the manager and the CFO have been very receptive to. They are required to do a corrective action plan. I think it's important that you all read the corrective action plan, get involved in that, and you'll see what their direct responses are to our findings. I think the corrective action plan is a good document that is required.
My only final question to you would be, was there any place in any of our departments where you thought that we had more people than we needed? You said...
Right. No, there's no overlapping of personnel that we have seen here. I know that the hot topic is the budget and that you want to discuss the cutting of appropriations. And the only thing I would like to recommend is that you also start looking at revenues. I mean, that's something that we can't put in a report because there's really no auditing requirement to have you all look at revenues. But revenues are the key. I think the manager said earlier, a lot of your appropriations are pretty much non-discretionary. I mean, they are what they are. A lot of them are contracts, they're personnel, they're insurance, they're health benefits that are required to be given to employees. There's pension costs. These costs are non-discretionary. But on the revenue side, there are things that other municipalities are doing. Shared services are key on the cost-cutting side. But on the revenue side, again, there's things that other municipalities are doing that I think you have to be more open to, which is part of your budget conversation, right?
Yes, I agree. Have you ever conducted an audit on a municipality with no recommendations?
We have had one or two over the last 30 years, sure. A lot of times, though, the CFO of that municipality might have been a former auditor in their past life, and that person had more of an eye on what internal controls are, how important it was to have, certain things done in a certain way, to have checks and balances. But I have to also add, it was a much smaller municipality than Teaneck. I would argue that, I haven't seen other municipalities your size, but I think if you went on the internet and actually looked at other municipalities your size and you looked at their audit findings, you might see a few more than Teaneck has. But the findings are here for a reason. They are for our all protection. The governing body, the residents. This is your eyes on what's going on in the town. So I try not to make them as negative. I like to look at the positive side. Mm-hmm. You have one department with a 48-hour deposit, a couple of deposits that didn't make it in the bank, but you have 99% of your other departments in our tests making them properly. So again, for every negative, there's a positive.
Councilman Pruitt.
I just want to make sure that what you said in the document is what you would say here. And you said in the document that there are no material weaknesses.
That is correct.
But that there are some deficiencies.
That's correct.
So that is a positive in terms of how the town is being run.
Right. Materiality is the key in auditing. If there was an appropriation that was misappropriated for a case that might be a 50-cent case, to us that's not a material event. If materiality, again, depending upon the department, might be $500, might be $1,000, might be $10,000. So materiality is the key.
Councilman Son.
Mr. Garbarini, your report is dated June 6th. When was it sent to the township?
The date of the report is actually the date of our last day of field work, the date that we physically left the building, And it's also the date that the attorney provided us our legal representation letter. It's also the date of many, many confirmations that we do. A big part of our process is confirming to your insurance carrier, your legal representative. And that date is a key date in auditing. It may not mean much to the general public, but to us, that's an important date. That is the date that we physically left the building and received our last confirmation. I don't know if that helps. But,
no, understood. Again, I would have loved to have seen this sooner, and I was really focused on Audit Report Issue 1305, the lack of a budget, which is pretty much what brings us here this evening. In looking at financial statements in general, one of the things that I generally look at is changes. Are there major changes in numbers? And one of the things that I see that has been the decline, the rather sharp decline in surplus over the past several years. On January 1st, 2011, we had about $7 million on surplus. On December 31st, 2013, we had $4.3 million in surplus. And if I understand correctly, that was pumped up by a one-time cancellation of that $800,000. That cancellation on December 31st allowed that $800,000 to be added to surplus.
Yes, and to be used for reserve for tax appeals or whatever else you purpose, correct.
And again, the concern that I see is that, in essence, above and beyond the tax increases, we are systematically spending more money each year, dipping into surplus which has been declining about $1 million plus a year. How low can we go? What benchmark would you look at that would be the lowest number that we could have as a sustainable surplus?
This exact topic came up during the bond rating call with the rating agency, and we've had this conversation almost word for word, like your question. It was a topic that was brought up, and the bond rating agencies are comfortable with the fund balance that you have now at that level. But correct. But as all bond rating agencies would like, they would like to see more fund balance. I mean, that they do focus in on that. Fund balance is important also for the CFO in order to pay bills, because without having sufficient fund balance, there's not cash to pay invoices, and it prevents you from going out for tax anticipation notes. So having a steady fund balance is in the best interests of everyone in Teaneck. I don't really see anybody that would want a lower fund balance, that's for sure.
Is there some percentage of fund balance? Is there some amount that you would say is a red line that we should not cross?
I would say, again, I'm focused on the bond rating agencies' comments, only because they're fresh in my mind. We just had the ratings call. I think they're very comfortable where we are. I would probably not like to see you go lower than that. That's not my call, though. That's the governing body's call. But I would say where you are now, if we can build back up, which I think is the goal of the manager and the CFO from conversations I've had with them, then I think that's the direction you want to be going, yes. On the other hand, the big push over the last couple of years on the state level was to get more surplus returned to the taxpayers. The thinking was that, there might be some municipalities that had too much surplus, and the comment that I heard, again, in the newspaper, budget seminars, was whatever, that this is money we've raised from the taxpayers, we'd like to get that back to them. So now, again, we're back to this balancing act. How much surplus do you want? How much do you want to return to the taxpayer? And again, I'll defer to the bond rating agencies because they control what we pay interest-wise on our debt, and they seem comfortable at this level. We actually discussed going to a higher level of a rating, and the amount of surplus that would be required probably wouldn't be worth it. It would literally be double.
What would make Moody's become cranky about a AA2? What kind of surplus level?
I would say you probably have $1 million cushion, or just off the top of my head, without doing any calculations, without talking to them specifically about it. But they consider you a strong AA2, which means that you probably have about $1 million cushion.
Okay. There's another number that I had not seen before, which is interfund changes, which is listed as a credit of $1 million. And there's no explanation, and that seems to be reducing surplus. I'm not sure where that comes from, and I think we all benefit from a greater understanding.
As you know, one of the things that we do in municipal government is we have what's called fund accounting. Accounting is done in funds. You have a trust fund, and that money is set for various trust fund items. You have a capital fund, you have a current fund. From time to time, they find it necessary to borrow money from another department or another fund as a temporary measure, because maybe tax bills didn't go out, or because there's some other reason why the cash wasn't coming in quick enough. So most municipalities use that technique of borrowing from a fund. So what we're required to do is you take a little bit of a hit if you borrow for that fund, but when you pay it back, you get credit back for it. So that's why it's either a debit or a credit to fund balance.
What was... I mean, it's happened that someone's come over to borrow a cup of sugar and we net that out.
Right.
But very rarely do I have a neighbor come over and say, can I have $1 million?
Right. So what the key here is that the fund balance at the end of the year, the interfunds are required to be paid back. So that's the requirement. Sometimes that might overlap by a day or two into the next year, and that's the discrepancy that you're referring to.
So if there's a self-clearing entity, a self-clearing entry, where is this going to clear out? Is this going to be an entry in 14 that we haven't seen? I mean, this is a year in 2013. I'm just concerned
that
that
it's probably 12 into 13. Which one you're referring to is probably 12 into 13. If you looked at, I actually have a list of the interfunds, and they do balance.
This comes up, I'm looking on the comparative balance sheet, which is statement A, and this comes up as
Can you give us the page number, please?
Oh, boy. There are no page numbers.
On,
A.
If we refer to
the first A page, it's the first page after the auditor's notes, after page 3. I promise it does not. It has a lot of numbers, but none of them are page numbers. But again, it's the first page, and that's where I tend to look, is to look at the higher up pages, and this comes up as $1,096,000 as a December 31st year-end transaction. And that's what I'm just trying to understand going into 14. Where is this? Do I owe it? Is it coming back? This is on the first page after your summary report.
Right. I was going to refer you, if you don't mind, to page 14 in the notes to the financial statement, interfunds, receivables, and payables. I just thought that might be a better way to see how this works. And it's on the bottom. It's note number 7 on page 14.
Page 14. Okay, got it.
Or it's don't have numbers.
It makes it much more challenging. Again, we don't have a lot of control of the format. Okay. It's in the notes to the financial statements.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we got it. Perfect. Yep.
So, again, your question's a good one. As you can see, they do balance out at the end of the year, and that overlap would probably only be a day or two or a month, the most, but they should be all cleared out by the end of the year. That is the goal. You really don't want to have them open, because if they're open, then you get
that's my concern.
Right.
Just a quick question on the interfund transfers.
Sure.
If we allocate, let's say, $500,000 for one purpose, and then we get to the end of the year and we realize that we've only spent $300,000 of what was allocated for legal, for example, is an interfund transfer taking that $200,000?
No. I'll give you an example. Maybe this will help. If you look at the grant fund, okay, the grant fund was owed $158,216.62. What probably happened is, rather than transferring the money over to the grant fund, writing the check out of the grant fund account, it was just paid out of the current fund account. So the money was owed to the grant fund, or something to that effect. It's either money that's loaned to another fund temporarily, or the expenditure, because of the nature of the expenditure, could have went either way, and then maybe, they weren't sure if a grant was coming in on that expenditure or whatever. So the check was, there's many checkbooks here. I hope that I made that clear. I apologize if I didn't. You have not only many departments, but you have many, many, many checkbooks. You probably have in excess of 30 bank accounts. So you have to make a decision on which bank account to physically write the check. And for whatever reason, it might not have come out of the perfect bank account, and that's what causes an interfund.
Councilman Son.
Sure. Just one more question. Again, on page 15 of the statement, and it may be because I was looking at it in terms of absences. There's a little bit of a typo. I mean, thankfully, it's not 45 million. It's only 5 million in terms of vested unpaid compensation. But that is accruing at about, there was on a different statement, that's accruing at about $500,000 a year, and all we have set aside is $22,000. Now, from a government accounting standpoint, we don't have to account for that. We accrue that liability, and we just keep on not putting away anything for it, sort of not unlike what the state does for pensions.
Well, there is
do you have a concern that if this comes up, if there are retirements, and a lot of this is packed into a very small number of people, that we could have a significant hit for which we don't have anything set aside?
Yes, it's a concern throughout the state, actually. As you know, in your budget, there's a page dedicated to compensated absences. And that is a significant goal of the Division of Local Government Services, is to get municipalities to start accruing some money towards that.
How much, I mean, if we're accruing $22,000 and we have a $500,000 annual liability, are we really doing anything, or should we be accruing even more than that on an annual basis?
Most municipalities are accruing much more than that, yes. I would say about 10% over time, 10%.
To set aside towards that.
Right.
Councilman Pruitt.
You mentioned the secret weapon is revenue, and you mentioned shared services as an example. I guess that also would extend to other kinds of development in the township where we can. And it seems to me as if everybody wants to keep everything that we have, including our 1930 perspective on how the town looks. And I think that from a pragmatic point of view, we may have to develop in some areas that will cause some people to be a little bit upset. But the economic requirement is, if we want to maintain the services and not kill the taxpayers, we have to find some way to develop revenue.
Amen.
Any other council members have any questions for the auditor? We thank you for coming in. Moving forward, we will now begin our budget discussion, and I think a good place for us to begin is with a document that Councilman Son has prepared for us.
We had a very, very productive meeting earlier this week on Thursday morning. In attendance were the three members of the subcommittee, myself, Dr. Pruitt, Ellie Katz. Manager was here. The township attorney was in attendance. A big chunk of the meeting that we held on Thursday morning was dedicated to a presentation from the township attorney. Council member Castle and I, along with Dr. Pruitt, had met with the township attorney before Mr. Castle and I took office and had spoken about our goal and objective at a very broad level of seeing lower legal expenditures. Mr. Turretz had reviewed the legal expenditures on everything that is non-adversarial, everything that is not related to lawsuits or other adversarial proceedings such as tax appeals, and had come up with a number of approximately $300,000 per annum based on data from the past 3.5 years. The full calendar years 11, 12, 13, and plus the first half of 2014. And based on that, he proposed making a significant change in his retainer. His current retainer is $36,000 payable in 12 monthly payments, but there's a very small number of items that are included within, and to basically take all non-litigation, non-adversarial proceedings and move that in there. And in lieu of the $300,000 per year that is spent mostly on the $36,000 plus $100 a la carte, $150 an hour, this would be converted and capped at $19,750 per month, which would be a total of $237,000, which would be 20% less on those expenditures. Believe you me, I would love to see every other department come in with cuts of 20% for their expenditures. There was a specification that this would start as of October 1st, so there would be savings of approximately $5,000 per month compared to our baseline for the past 3.5 years. That would achieve savings of $15,000 in calendar year 2014, but going into calendar year 2015 on an annualized basis, that would be a reduction on that baseline of $60,000. The initial proposal that Mr. Turretz offered did not include any litigation related to Oprah and OPMA issues. And after further discussion, based on a suggestion that I had made, we had discussed, Mr. Turretz had raised the issue, he is not always notified in timely fashion. He wants to make sure that whatever guidance he provides is addressed. And at my suggestion, if Mr. Turretz indicated that if he were notified within a business day or two, if the guidelines on how to handle any Oprah or OPMA issues were addressed, that it would be included in the $237,000 per annum retainer. I feel, and this is my personal feeling, and this was discussed there, that if we did that, if we could have an opportunity, this is part of our bigger issue of coming up with processes on the Oprah-OPMA issue to make sure that these are addressed, are logged. I do want to thank, and this was separate and independent, but Jamie Evelina had arranged for Mr. Castle and myself. Mr. Rupp had independently participated in a webinar from a firm, GovQA, that provides a tracking tool that would allow residents, reporters, folks from the suburbanite to go online to fill out a form, and that also could be used to track, make sure that the attorney is notified, make sure that we are addressing those issues. But on this baseline, just looking at the proposals that Mr. Turretz made, this would be a $75,000 savings, most of which would be in calendar 2015. We also discussed further issues regarding the budget, and I think there was a tremendous recognition, and some of this came up in Good and Welfare, that there's there's a difference between budget cuts and spending cuts. There is a lot of money every year that rolls into surplus based on unexpended budgetary items in excess of $2 million a year. Many of those positions, whether it's firefighters or park rangers or dispatchers that we have not hired, could be cut out of the budget, but the net effect of that, and I think Mr. Broughton would confirm this with significant eagerness, is cutting surplus in the upcoming year. If we cut out all these positions, and Dr. Rasheen is absolutely correct. It does, a lot of these add up to $780,000. If we cut that out of the budget, we would be cutting surplus next year by $780,000. And I think, as Mr. Garbarini indicated, that's where we start hitting the red line. That's where we start getting too low. What we need to start doing is looking at not just cutting budget, but cutting spending. One of the things that we discussed, and I know that this is something that my two distinguished colleagues on the subcommittee, Dr. Pruitt and Mr. Katz, had spent a lot of time going around on circles on, was the definition of a hiring freeze. And we did discuss the possibility of looking significantly at a hiring freeze, not only through year-end 2014, but including 2015. When there's an episode of The Simpsons where Homer Simpson was informed about this Japanese word, this Chinese word about, and he says, chrysotunity. We have a chrysotunity here. And we need to take advantage of our chrysotunity, and this chrysotunity does not end in 2014. The CFO's numbers for this year include a tax levy increase of 3.6%, but you don't pay the tax levy, you pay the tax rate. And the numbers that we'd be looking at would be about 5.25%. 2015 is even worse for other reasons. Revaluation is going to give some people cuts, but will give other people big increases just based on the changes in their valuation. And the number that the CFO is estimating is an increase of 5.47%. So between these 2 years, we could see increases of about 11%. And I don't think you have to be a senior in order to see that that's a problem. And I think we need to start looking at every single number. One of the suggestions that we made and that we had a very broad consensus is that we should be going back to departments. There's in essence, both top-down and bottom-up issues. We can go bottom-up and look at certain items and say, you're spending too much on this, or this is unnecessary, but also to go top-down to say, how can we make cuts, and to ask managers, department by department, to go through and look in a range of about on an annualized range of about 2 to 5%, and to give us a menu of potential cuts that we could make. And to echo something that Dr. Rasheen offered, I think Dr. Pruitt has seen as a member of the Board of Education that the business administrator does a wonderful job of giving the Board of Education a series of choices. Here are potential cuts that could be made. And rather than going through a budget and trying to second guess, is to give the managers the flexibility to make the cuts that they think are most effective, that can offer us the biggest bang for the buck, that can still offer the residents the services they're looking for, that can still, without firing people, but have the flexibility to cut that budget not only in 14 when we only have half a year left, but also in 15. I think that this pretty much summarizes the results. Boy, it seemed like a very long hour meeting that we had. But I think we did accomplish a great deal, and I would appreciate any further input from Dr. Pruitt as to your thoughts about our subcommittee.
Just add one piece. When we got into a good discussion, we began to talk about the 3 months left and next year, so that it's not the kind of a situation where we can take care of 2013 or 2014 and not have an impact on the coming year. So that this is a really, I'll say it's a very committed budget committee. And we have made some recommendations for people to look at, and I believe that cutting spending is a very important aspect of this whole thing. And I want to commend Alan for capturing all of this stuff on this 2 pieces of paper, because it was a kind of a rip-roaring discussion, you might say.
Councilman Stone, if you could elaborate on just a couple of things. I mean, we discussed it, but I think it's probably important for the public to hear as well, since 7 mines have access to information, and then there are about 40,000 other mines that also have access to the same information, and input is is welcome. But in going through these types of things and talking about cutting our spending, and really actually going back a bit further and talking about what Councilman Pruitt and Deputy Mayor Katz went round for round in the last council about a hiring freeze. Were you able to define hiring freeze as opposed to? I mean, was there some consensus on that? And the reason I ask is because I know that we've hired a couple of township employees over the past, let's say, 3 months in areas where we actually needed them, for our safety net, whether it was police or fire. But did you come to a consensus on what hiring freeze was, and is that a recommendation?
Yes, as a subcommittee, our consensus was that we should have a hard hiring freeze through year-end 2015, that we should not be filling any vacancies as they become available unless the council agrees that those vacancies should be filled, either based on significant public need and emergency, or that we are better off financially, for example, that it would cut overtime usage or other reasons where we can justify that and reach consensus on that hiring. And that this should go not just through year-end 2014, but that this should be in place through year-end 2015.
So basically what you're saying is for the positions that have been funded, that the council has funded, that should a vacancy come up throughout the year, that those positions should not be filled?
That was the consensus, and again, I'm asking. That was our consensus. There was something.
Let me say what I believe we agreed to or suggested, that the bodies working in Teaneck today will be the same bodies working in Teaneck at the end of 2014. The same number of people. Now, if there is some kind of crisis that we have to deal with, we have to deal with that when it occurs. But no additional hiring of personnel, period.
The same individuals, not the same number of individuals.
Same.
The consensus that we discussed, and again, I think this was the same issue in the Pruitt-Katz debate at the other go-around, was whether, again, if we have 370 employees, do we maintain 370 and not go above, or as an employee leaves, we ratchet down unless we decide to refill that. The discussion that we had, as I understood it, was that we would keep on ratcheting down, that if a vacancy becomes available, that we would not fill that in unless there was consensus vote for nodding heads that we wanted to fill that spot. Towards that end, one of the things that we asked for, and I think is really crucial to see, is a listing of the positions in the budget. There are many, 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 many more positions in the budget that are not only unfilled, that were never intended to be filled. And the opportunity to whether it's firefighters, whether it's dispatchers, whether it's SLEOs, whether it's an engineer, there are many positions in the budget that are there for the purpose of not being spent. And it really becomes very, very difficult to manage around that without having an understanding of what the actual positions are, who's on the staff, to identify the position, and then to identify whether the position is vacant or who is filling that position, so that we know who those people are with associated pay information, so that we can look ahead to next year or 2 years ahead and anticipate whether it's with a step, whether it's with an increase that's guaranteed based on negotiations, so that we know where those numbers are. The numbers that were provided by the CFO for wages that estimate for 15, 16, 17 were done by adding 2%. That's a good guess, but that's just a guess. We have an opportunity to look at those positions and see how they can be filled, should be filled, and how we can use those positions most effectively.
I guess what my issue is, and then I'll let the manager respond, is that if we fund the position at the beginning of the year and it becomes vacant at the end of the year, why would council think that that position is not needed at the end of the year? If there's a need for the position, there's a need for the position. And I don't think that council should get into the business of hiring and managing the town. I think that's the role of the manager. If the position is not needed, then it should be eliminated, period, at any point in the budget process. So that's what, I have a concern with that. And I want the manager to respond to that.
I think that you said...
Before you go, William.
Okay.
We're in a situation where we have to really do something. And if we're not saying to fire anybody, but we are saying that personnel is a very large figure, and if we can manage it better, then we need to look to do that.
But that's not our role, is to manage the personnel.
I think that, I think you said everything that I was thinking about.
It's not to manage the personnel.
The essence of what Mr. Sohn is saying is management.
Yeah.
The way that we've managed this town, managed the employees, managed when we hire somebody, is why we have a surplus. So that we do that so we can look into the latter part of the year, look into the next year, try to delay some of those hirings until the last minute. That is a maneuver of management. That's how you manage. I don't just take this budget that the council gives me and spend it all on January 1st, which I could. I don't do stuff like that. I manage. I manage every single penny that is spent here. I am approving every single expenditure. One point. There's one place. There is no one sitting here in this room that has the picture, the financial picture, the administrative picture of what's going on in Teaneck except me. I'm the only person that's seeing it all, the entire picture, and I'm supposed to see it all. Now I'm going to give you some of the things that I'm concerned about as the manager and that my department heads are concerned about. One is we're concerned about overtime. In cutting this budget, we're concerned about overtime. Police department and DPW have spent approximately 90% of their overtime for 2014. That is a huge concern. How would we cover that? We cover it by using the monies that exist in salary for people we didn't hire, for people who may have left. Any breakage, we cover that overtime for particular departments in those accounts. We've been doing it for years, and we've been successful at doing it. We've had things like Sandy and these various storms. Other towns had emergencies where they had to borrow from the next year. Teaneck didn't have that issue. We were able to cover those expenses. These are all the reasons why cutting the budget is a bad idea, and I would not recommend it. The second thing, tax appeal judgments. Yeah, we have an estimate on what tax appeal judgments may be. We know how many tax appeal cases that we have, but we don't know the exact number. And tax appeal judgments hit your surplus. They hit your surplus. If you don't have surplus, you have a huge problem because you'll have a budget deficit. So there has to be sufficient money there to cover tax appeal judgments. And you cannot budget for the tax appeal judgments that we receive from the local finance board. And the simple reason is you can't budget because it's money we shouldn't have had in the first place. That's the simple reason. That's one of my concerns. Another item, Glen Point tax appeal. Glen Point tax appeal, it's ongoing. It's something that we're looking at. We'll probably be able to spread that out over several years, but it's a concern. We know that it would be prudent and it would be best to be reserving money in our budget to cover that tax appeal. But how are we going to do it if we can't raise the budget? If we're talking about cutting the budget, how are we talking about increasing the reserves as well? It's something that we cannot do, and it's something I'm concerned about. Terminal leave payouts. How are we going to cover terminal leave payouts? We have 2 significant terminal leave payouts coming in the police department that we know about. We have to pay them. We have to pay them this year. I'm concerned about that. There needs to be enough money budgeted in the police department budget to help cover that. How do we usually handle these terminal leave payouts? We usually handle them by breakage, money left in the salary line, or for the entire township. We usually budget about $150,000. That's it. For everybody, anybody who may leave in any of the departments, 338 employees. And we've been able to do it, looking at the entire budget, doing transfers at the end of the year, doing every single type of maneuver that we can do so that we don't have to increase the tax burden on our residents. I'm concerned about the liabilities relative to terminal leave and compensated absences. We're not putting any money away for that. We know it's $5 million. We know that everyone's not going to leave on the same day, but is it possible that several people could leave at the same time? Yes. But we've been able to handle that, budgeting the way that we've been budgeting, very prudently and actively managing the budget for the past 5 years that I've been here.
Mr. Manager, just listen. Let me respond a little bit.
Can I just finish going down my list while I'm on the roll here? You can. Number 6, the 6th item I have, replenishment of the surplus. We already know that if we don't replenish the surplus, we're just deferring a problem into 2015. We know that the money we have right now that's in this budget, there's a portion of it that will go into surplus next year. And it's needed. We know that our surplus is being reduced because of tax appeal judgments. That's the major reason why our surplus is being reduced. That issue is being dealt with. And 2015, right after 2015, that type of problem we should see go away. Budget over expenditures. There's certain accounts that we have in the budget. Take, for instance, maintenance at the DPW. We overexpend that line every single year. And we can't necessarily budget exactly what we need in that line. But what do? We save money in other areas, and we wind up paying for items that are in that particular budget line. We spend a lot of money on maintaining vehicles, maintaining the township, and we try our best to try to inch up that budget, but we can't. We haven't been able to get it to where we want it to be. Another item is anticipated revenue shortfalls. In this budget, we talk about the difference between the tax. We talk about how do we get to this $70 million that we spend? Well, we get to it by a tax levy, which is about $55 million. We get to it through state aid. We get to it through grants, and we get to it through revenue that we anticipate that we're going to receive. Well, the problem is, what if we're wrong? What if we anticipate a certain amount and we receive less than we actually anticipated, which does happen? We got to get the money out of the existing budget. That could happen. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about unanticipated storm and snow removal costs. Yes, we did get through the first part of the year. It was a very difficult year. A lot of snowstorms, small snowstorms, large snowstorms. But this could occur in December. We know that we could have snow in November. We haven't gotten through the storm season of the summer. We could have a hurricane. Town needs to be prepared for it, and we need to have sufficient funds to deal with those issues. I'm concerned about additional legal expenses. We're having legal expenses for Oprah lawsuits and things like that. We have one additional expenditure that's going to be approximately $83,000. We have to deal with it. It has to be paid. The $83,000 has to come from somewhere. I'm concerned about, at the end of the year, being able to transfer money between accounts to cover areas where we may have estimated too low. It is a fact, and it occurs almost every year, that November, December, we have to make adjustments. That's why the state allows it. Starting in November, you can make adjustments in your budget and transfer between the various lines of your budget. Concerned about our credit rating. Concerned about borrowing costs in the future. That's the reason for trying to build our surplus so that we maintain our AA2 and maybe one day be able to even move up to an AA1. You know, even at AA2, we were able to sell $7.2 million worth of bonds at an interest rate of 2.67%. Almost free money. 2.67%. Incredibly low interest rate. We need to protect that because this township needs a great deal of work on its infrastructure, and we will need to borrow for those costs.
William, before I forget, because you...
Councilman Castle, can we please let him finish so that Dr. Pruitt can speak first, and then...
Can we know how long the list is?
I'm almost done.
But what I'm saying is that we have to have some kind of order, and he's waiting to speak.
Okay, I just want to know how long the list was.
I'm good. Just a couple more. All right. I'm concerned about workers' compensation claims, staffing, having low staff and not being staffed properly leads to workers working more and increasing the likelihood that they will get hurt on the job, which will increase our costs. There's this whole body of workmen's compensation laws where employees get hurt on the job, they go to workmen's compensation court, they reach some sort of settlement, the town pays it, years later they may get injured again and have a reopener that could cost the township more. I'm concerned about that. Concerned that one day with recycling, we may one day have to pay for our recycling to be taken away. That's a serious, serious issue. And it's because of the demise of the world markets, China closing the door on us. We may one day have to pay. I'm concerned about our $75,000 settlement that we have to pay for advanced housing. Concerned about it. We have to find the money to pay that. And the last thing I'm concerned about is with our new insurance. We have a deductible on liability. So now, we never had this before. We have a $100,000 deductible per occurrence on our auto insurance. So now, when the DPW truck is plowing and they damage somebody's car and the cost is $1,000, the township has to pay. You total someone's car and it's our fault, the township has to pay. And that money's not in the budget. We're getting that money from self-insurance. So there has to be sufficient room in this budget to cover all of these different costs and variables that we're going to face in 2014.
Can you provide us that list?
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let me ask a question. First of all, I don't want to manage this town because it's a real big headache. But could not all those things you listed be listed under their category in the budget? So that you make an estimate on what it's going to cost for self-insurance, what it's going to cost for the Glen Point, whatever it is, and have those things in the visible budget. And if we don't have to spend that money, that goes into surplus. But it's identified rather than having a salary budget line that we don't think we're going to use to make that into surplus. Can't we identify the costs that you just mentioned?
Well, I think we identify it when I present the budget to the council and we have a discussion, and we've had let's take, for instance, the dispatchers. We've been discussing that for more than a year, and the money's been sitting there. But to understand exactly what's going on with it, you had to have come to our meetings to understand what the delays are. Why is the money sitting there? Why is the money, not being expended? So we have a state budget form. The township puts in that state budget form exactly the information that the state says that we should have in a particular form. But we go even further than that. And I would challenge anybody to show me a town that has more budget information available than the township of Teaneck. I put together this book every year. It has every single thing we spend money on. Anybody could take this book, it's on the website, it's in the library, and find out, what does the health department spend money on? And I think it's very clear in this book. But this isn't the state budget form. We still got to put it all in a form that the state wants, which looks different, and it's difficult to read. So I encourage people, get involved in our budget process. We have 4 meetings in January of the budget year. We have department head meetings in my office. We've been talking about this. We've had it listed for months and months and months, having discussions about it. There's more information here, I will guarantee you, than any municipality in this state on the budget.
Councilman Castle.
Mr. Manager. Well, Mike, listen, it is your responsibility to manage all those things, and I don't think anyone is questioning what your responsibilities are. I mean, I pulled up a job description of a township manager, and all the things that you just listed are in that job description. Your job is to manage the money, but our job is to ensure that if you ask for $70 million and you only spend $66 million, and there's been a consistent pattern in which we have been over budgeting, and we're returning money to the budget, we have to go back and look at how we're making that assumption of what we're going to spend. And I want everyone to be very, very clear on this. We borrowed $4 million from our surplus last year, give or take. We returned $2.5 million to our surplus. So based on the money that you asked for and the money that was spent, there was a $2.5 million differential. In past years, there's been a $2 million differential or a $1.5 million differential. And what I'm saying is, the taxpayers are paying increases not on the money that you spend, but on the money that you ask for. So if we had a 2% increase, or if we did I believe it's a 3.5% or 4% increase based on what you spent last year, we would still come in under what you're asking for this year. And if we know that we're not spending within millions of dollars of what we're asking the residents for, why would we ask them to fund increases on money that we are not spending? That's where I don't know if there's anyone in the room who's having difficulty understanding that, but I'm having difficulty understanding why we're asking for money on top of what we didn't spend. Because taxpayers are paying for it. Now, if you said 2% on top of $66 million, great. But you're asking for $71 million, and we only spent $66. That's a $5 million differential. I need clarity on that.
That I can give you. I can give you complete clarity on all of the differences between last year's budget and this budget and why there are differences. We get one opportunity to budget. Okay, so...
Or 7 months.
If we want to have those dispatchers, or we think that we're going to be able to move on hiring those dispatchers, you got to have the money in the budget. If you don't get the money in the budget in that year, and we usually pass the budget somewhere April, early May, this year is an anomaly. If you don't have the money in the budget, you cannot act on it. So what we were trying to do was to have the money in the budget so that we can get firefighters who we're paying almost $100,000 to not do a job that a person can do for $50,000. The money has to be in the budget to do that. You can't... I mean, under any other circumstances, if you gave somebody $70 million and they didn't spend it all, they would be commended. I'm doing exactly what this council is asking. Reduce spending. I'm doing that every single day by looking at every single expenditure and deciding if we need to spend that now and looking at the entire picture. And I have my department heads doing it. And they should not be punished for not spending all of the money in their budget. I've told them, if you don't need something in your budget that you've requested, don't request it. Leave the money there. That doesn't mean that next year we don't put it in.
No, but doesn't it, and I can only rely on my own experience, and I'll tell you, as a Marine, we got an allowance of ammunition. We had to go out and qualify with that ammunition. If we used half of the ammunition to qualify and we brought the ammo back, the gunny would say, go fire off the rest of the ammunition. Use what was allocated so I can get more next year, right? We are fortunate that we don't have departments that are using all the money that we are appropriating for their departments. But it does not mean that we shouldn't look at what they actually need and say, we're going to budget this, because historically you've never spent more than this. And if there are ways that you can find savings, do that. If I, as a Marine, were able to qualify with fewer rounds of ammunition because I didn't need all those rounds, it's just extra weight. Right now, what you're saying is we are budgeting in specific categories just in case we have overage in other categories. And I think what Councilman Dr. Pruitt has basically asked is, why can't we list what we're actually spending the money for in the budget? Because, you know, for me, it's almost as if we are saying one thing, we're doing another, and then the next year we're asking for more money. And we weren't completely honest to begin with where the money was going. And that's not to say that we're lying, but it's just to say if we know we're not going to spend $10,000 on paper, because historically we spend $6,500 on paper, year after year after year, why do we keep budgeting $10,000 on paper?
Now, okay, let me just add, and hopefully this clears something up here. The total of $2.5 million that's going back into surplus is not all coming from department operations. The amount that we spend on operating the departments that the department heads have control over is $5.9 million. That's it. So they're not spending only half the money. It's not that, it's not that simple. That $2.5 million that's going back into surplus, some of it may be coming from department operations. So you get that. That's something you got to be clear with. There's only $5.9 million that the department heads that we're using to run each of these departments. If you look in this book under tab 5, it's about $5.9 million where you look at all of the different departments on what those departments are spending to operate.
I need to take a 5-minute break. Are there any objections? Okay. And can we agree to end at 11, quarter to 11, I'd prefer, but...
We committed that Dr. Pruitt's birthday present was that we would finish by 11 o'clock. He is not a man who asks for anything more than that. I think a man who asks for an 11 o'clock adjournment should get it for his birthday present.
Why don't we give him a 10:45 one, but just a 5-minute recess. Thank you.
We're going to give him less than what he's asking for.
We are going to fulfill that promise.
I don't have it.
Exactly. Really.
Stanley got a copy.
Jamie, I think we have, we need you. Ellie's not here, and I don't know. I think he recused himself in budget.
I have a code book, like, very few of us have a code book, and then ones are not, they're not. So no, we don't do that. What we do is, we go on the website, right? The website is education. It's a version of education. It's 95. That's what that. So if you want a reference, let's say you go to traffic, right, and you put in, when you go to the every call my cell phone. You can just call my cell phone. I'm only giving my cell phone. But where else do you have to
That's why
Council members, please return to the dais. Thank you. So, just in terms of trying to figure out a plan for the next meeting and how to get through this evening, we've heard many recommendations this evening from the Budget Subcommittee as well as from Councilman Castle. And Councilman, are you making a recommendation in terms of your statement about the difference in what was spent versus what is being asked for this year?
Mayor, I am. I'm making the recommendation that we keep spending, or we keep the budget flat from last year. $69 million was asked for last year, and we spent $66.5. I'm making the recommendation to my council colleagues that we keep the budget at $69 million. And if there is an emergency expenditure like a storm that comes up, there is a process in place by which we can forecast and say we need $500,000 to cover a storm, and we as a council make a decision at the time that we approve $500,000. But if we know that historically we've been spending millions of dollars less than what we've been asking for, and the taxpayers are paying the difference, they're paying those increases based on what was asked for, I think that we should freeze our spending. Now, there are going to be some exceptions. We just hired firefighters, we just hired police officers, and the manager is going to be able to manage the budget and say, okay, we're going to need this for salaries for the new employees that we just hired. But I can't see any reason why we need to ask the taxpayers for more than the $69 million that we asked for last year, knowing that we came in under that.
Is there any, do I see any nodding heads? Is that a nodding head?
I think that it's far more complicated than it appears to be. With this so-called overage of $4 million or whatever number it is, the surplus continues to go down. And I think the concern about the surplus is such that we may not be able to make that kind of cut.
In addition to the fact that it could negatively impact our rating and our interest rates in the future. Not if we cut to 69 million.
Well, let's just understand the process. We're meeting again on Tuesday night,
On
correct?
Tuesday night, yes.
And I've heard all the different views, and I think I want to keep on hashing it all out and keep hearing. I'm sorry, I heard some different views, and I just want to keep on going through the process ahead of Monday night and keep hearing we've heard the pros, the cons, the absolute cons, and the budget rating, and the bond rating. So I'd like to keep talking it through.
Okay.
Dr. Rasheen's had an opportunity during Good and Welfare to speak about the experience that Englewood and Ridgewood have had over the past few years. As it turns out, Englewood had 3 consecutive zeros. They could not maintain that streak for 4 years. They had an increase of 1.75%. I spoke to an Englewood council member, and I said, you know, we are in something of a budget crisis in Teaneck. What's your secret? And he said, you know, don't believe that 0% budget. It's all smoke and mirrors. And I responded to him, and I said, you know what? We are doing the same smoke and mirrors, but we've had a budget increase of 15% over the past 4 years. I'm looking ahead, and I see budget increases this year and next year that would total 11%. We are systematically spending down our surplus. Okay. Surplus is declining by $750 to $1 million a year. This is an unacceptable position. It's not just seniors. I guess it was past Mickey's bedtime, but it's not just seniors who are affected. Every single resident is affected if over a span of 6 years we're going to have taxes up 25%. There's a reason why over the past 4 years we have not had economic development. It's remarkably difficult to attract businesses here to Teaneck if we see taxes soaring consistently. Now, the question is, in the budget, and it is very, 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 very hard for us to manage as a council, there are items within the $5.9 million. I think Councilman Castle brought it up, and it was one that you, as a council member, brought up, Madam Mayor. Why is it that we keep on budgeting $10,000 for office supplies or paper when we keep on spending $6,500? Well, account by account, there is padding built into this budget, but it makes it impossible for a council to manage. If we spend $8,000, is that good because we were 20% low, or is it bad because we were 20% high of what we were spending in previous years? Every single one of the items that the manager listed, perhaps with the exception of the self-inflicted issue of tax appeals, is something that every municipality in this state is hit with. Snow doesn't fall just in Teaneck. Other municipalities have lawsuits. Others have unexpected expenses. Others have employees who are leaving and retiring. But we need to know where this money is going. Most of it is not in the $5.9 million that's budgeted towards expenses. Most of it is in the $32 million that's budgeted to employees. There are dozens of positions that are deliberately budgeted and not filled, and we don't know what those numbers are. When I look at the org charts that are included in this book, which are wonderful, I don't know whether there's a person there or whether that is a vacant position. There have been in previous years constant discussion. How many people are there in the police department? Is it 116? Is it 113? Is it 92? Is it the uniformed? None of these numbers are reconcilable. Until we are in a position where we know what those numbers are and we can manage them, we will be unable to come up with those numbers. And I agree, we have to replenish surplus. Perhaps we can go a bit lower. I think that Mr. Garbarini was willing to go below the number where we are, and that might give us a little bit of flexibility.
He doesn't rate us, so I
asked the question. I think we need to know how low we can go.
He was not committed. He said his comfort level was where we were at.
I agree. I would like to stay where we are, but perhaps we have a little bit of flexibility. But if we are going to keep surplus the same, if we are going to, because it's been declining, we have to replenish it, not deplete it. The only way we can do that is by cutting spending, not by cutting budgets, because cutting a budget has the impact of basically changing the fudge factor, of cutting, again, unfortunately, Dr. Rashid's suggestion of cutting $780,000 in unfilled positions would cut the budget, but it would also deplete surplus.
I guess, Council,
unless we cut spending, and we have a better idea of what we're spending, we will never get control over this.
Because I'm not hearing what your bottom line is in terms of what you're saying.
Well, I think we don't have enough data right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we need to cut several $100,000 this year, but given where we are now, given that there's very little time left in 2014 to make changes, we need to take that opportunity to look at 2015, where the CFO is estimating a 5.5% hike, above and beyond anything else that any resident may face due to the revaluation. This has to be done now. We have to start doing what we can for 2014 and making substantial cuts for 2015 while leaving enough money in there to replenish surplus and cover all the other crises and situations that may come across the board that happen in every single one of the 565 municipalities in this state.
Councilman Schwartz.
Sorry, Mr. Councilman Stone, just a few comments. Maybe we have to ask ourselves, what type of council person could we be? Do we want to be? Do we want to be that person that doesn't get elected because we raised the taxes slightly, and maybe I'm fine with that? Or do we want to be the council person that took that risk, took that chance, which may work out, or it may lead to emergency meeting emergency meeting upon needing midterm tax increases and whatnot. And I don't know the answer, and that's what we're debating. But what I do know is, an expression my mother always told me when I came home with a B, and I said, the rest of the class got a B, and she said, I don't care about the rest of the class. There should be 573 or some odd municipalities I only care about Teaneck. And, you smoke and mirrors. Hackensack was this model that we've been, we were told about until all of a sudden we open up the Bergen Record and we read, they may need between $10 and $30 million. Well, that model just went out the window. Englewood's got a lot of issues in Englewood. They've got this, and this is just me, in my opinion, this very upper class and very low class. And I'm not really sure I want to be in Englewood either. I didn't call your comments stupid, and I really appreciate if you call my comments stupid. Have a good night, Dr. Powers. And so I'd like to focus on what we want to see Teaneck to be. And I think we should, and I appreciate you setting up these meetings, and we have more meetings coming next week to keep talking it through. Because, again, I'm not really sure which way I want to go. I do like the fact that you used the word, I think it was the departments in snow. We said, we can't be doing so many things better. Well, no, I think some of them we are doing better. I think that snow, for example, is something that there is no benchmark. The benchmark is simple: drive on the streets. There's your benchmark. And I don't want to see that part cut. So I think we just keep on going back and forth and get to this in the next meeting or so.
Thank you. Councilman Pruitt.
When you start throwing these numbers around, keep in mind that half the year is gone. So if you talk about $750,000, that's only $300 and something thousand. So you got to really be careful what we're really talking about, and we may not be able to do much with the current budget at all.
And so lastly, I agree with Councilman Pruitt. I think it may be a little unrealistic at this point to considering we spent more than half of what has been allocated for this year to go back. According to the numbers I'm looking at, we have in the actuals that I'm looking at. I think that we need to look at the recommendations that were made by the Budget Subcommittee, some of which I feel are reasonable and can be doable for this year, and revisit, mull this over and come back on Tuesday, ready to make some decisions as to the type of cuts that we want to make. Just as a reminder, I will not be here on Tuesday, as I stated at the last council meeting. I will be watching and can call, but I am not going to be able to be here on next Tuesday. With that said, we have some additional business items that we need to, and just to recap, I think that this discussion was very healthy. And I'm glad that we are going through this exercise and doing this, and I think that it's something that we need to do ongoingly for next year's budget as well. I also feel that I don't want for us to get into the business or framework of thinking that we're the managers of the town. If we fund a position, it's because we feel that we need it. And we don't want to have the CFO resign and us not meet or be able to come to consensus on it, and the manager can't fill the position. We don't want to cripple the manager. We have him here because we trust him as the manager to do what it is that we have funded the town, funding level for the town. So with that said, does anyone have any final comments on the budget before we move on to the the resolutions, the consent agenda?
If my council colleagues would agree to it, I'm happy to put forth information that I can disseminate to all of you and to the clerks so it can go on public record, but literally color-coded charts of our spending historically, what we've been asking for, what we've been spending, and what the taxpayers have had as a burden, so that you can see a graphical representation of how we're trending. Because right now, I think that numbers on the sheet, kind of get lost. And if you all would like that, I'd be happy to do that. But we're trending our surplus down, our spending is trending up, and the amount of money that we're spending has a similar trend. So I'd be happy to do that. I'll do the legwork, but only if you want me to.
The answer is yes, but I think the two different views I'm having is yours and then the manager's. So I'm almost kind of looking for his rebuttal of yours, and maybe that's more importantly done for next Tuesday. It's very similar to what you had just done earlier, but in swallowing it and listening to everything you said and he said, I think those are our two views. And if you can provide that, and then I'll ask him for that rebuttal of that, of what you want to do, what he doesn't want to do, and because I think that's exactly where we're heading right now.
Madam Mayor, one of the things that we had asked for as a subcommittee was to look at and have an understanding of all the positions in the budget, to be able to look at those positions, to be able to map them out department by department to the bottom line listed in salaries, to be able to identify who is filling those positions, what their salary are.
Who the individual person.
Who the incumbent is in that spot. Yeah. And to be able to identify those vacant positions, to be able to understand what we are managing to, and to manage what we have available to manage.
We do get a chart. Yeah, the chart in the budget with the actual positions.
Every year I put in this document the positions that are vacant, and I put the amount we need to fund for existing employees. All of the numbers are here. I heard it mentioned several times about there's dozens of funded positions that we don't intend to fill. I don't understand where that's coming from or what positions are being spoken about here. There's not dozens of positions. You have the dispatcher positions. We know it. All the positions that were vacant when I put this budget together, as of January 1st, I disclosed all of those vacancies in the budget document I provided to the council. Do I ever provide the names of the individuals? Never. The names of the individuals, who the incumbent is in that position, is immaterial. It is how much money we need to fund those particular positions, and any contractual increases associated with those positions.
I think I understood, and I just want to point of clarification, but I think what Councilman Stone was asking for was, for example, in sitting down with the police department knows that there are certain individuals who are going to be retiring, or they know in 3 years a certain swath of officers are going to be eligible for retirement. So in knowing who's eligible, and I think that's where you're trending, but I'm not quite sure, so I'd ask for a point of clarification. I didn't think it was to identify specific individuals. I thought it was just, I understood it to be that you wanted to identify individuals who may be vacating those.
He asked for names specifically.
I mean, that's one aspect. I mean, the other question is, for example, we've seen with the fire department where there are issues of vacancies affecting the ability to keep firehouses open. If we don't know where those positions are, it becomes very, very hard to manage that. When I said dozens, I add up on the first page in section, is that 4? It adds up to 24. That's where I came up with dozens, that there are 24 positions that are listed as vacant or new. Those are positions that I'm looking at that, as I understand, are in the budget that have not been filled. And I'd like to gain a better understanding of what those positions are so that we can manage what these numbers should be, by knowing where we are now, so that we know where to go forward.
Mr. Manager, could you provide us an actual of the actual vacancies we have?
Okay, I'll give an update memo on the vacancies that we have and how many employees we actually have.
As of
I'll
now.
update for
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay, can I have someone to move resolutions B through D?
I'd actually like to make a nomination on Resolution C. Of the candidates that I've had an opportunity to interview.
Councilman, can I ask for a motion so that motion's on the floor? You can move your motion after.
I'm still new at this.
Okay, that's okay. Can I have a motion to move resolutions B through D?
I move that we submit B through D, resolutions B through D.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call?
Councilmember Castle?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Katz? Councilmember Pruitt? Councilmember Schwartz? Councilmember Song?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. And these are the amended resolutions as indicated in the beginning of the meeting.
I was going to ask that.
Yes.
We put that on the record, sorry.
This is the what was amended to table the two applicants that had not been interviewed. No, absolutely no. No other changes, just the two tables that were mentioned at the beginning of the meeting.
Who did not attend?
Yes. That did not attend the interviews. Okay, you're up.
Better up, okay.
I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Attorney, or any of my council colleagues, but we nominated an individual on the planning board to an unexpired term. Is the way I understand it, and that term has now come to an end. And of the individuals that I have had an opportunity to interview with council, I would like to make a nomination for our first alternate of the planning board, Kimberly Jones. I'd like to nominate her to be a permanent member of the planning board. And if I understand this correctly, we can reappoint her as a number one alternate, but she can still be nominated for a permanent position. Is that correct?
She was reappointed.
Yes, she is currently the alternate that was just reappointed. It is possible to nominate an alternate, right, to fill a regular position. I took a look at your rules of procedure just on the nomination because I wasn't quite sure how the nominations were made previously.
Last week.
Well, yeah, what the document, your Rule 9 provides that a majority of council may, subject to subsection C, which deals with notice to the public about filling vacancies, nominate as many candidates as there are vacancies to be filled, and the clerk will make a list of all such nominations. That sentence would seem to indicate that nominations have to be made by a majority of the council. Right?
So does that mean that everything we did last week is null and void?
Again, I'm just reading it what it says, right? But it seems to say that a nomination, according to this provision, has to be made by a majority of the council.
I'm not understanding.
Just to clarify a situation, if we appoint the two alternates to the two alternate openings, and then in subsequent weeks, we decide to make one of the alternates a permanent member, can't we do that?
Yeah, I believe I answered to that in the affirmative. What essentially would happen then is that you would now have a vacancy in one of the alternate positions, should that be done.
Right.
So, yes, that can be done. There were really a number of questions involved. One, can you do that? And the answer is yes. An earlier issue was how one makes nominations, okay? And as I'm looking at it, right, it would seem to say that nominations should be made by a majority. Having said that, you actually took official action tonight. That action stands. But
let me try one more time, just to make sure we got this thing right. We tabled two people.
Correct.
That the council has not interviewed yet, and we haven't decided what to do with them.
That's the ones that you've tabled are technically currently vacancies. In other words,
they would be vacancies.
So those are vacancies
because they would be reappointed. They're currently people who are on those boards, but they are not on there anymore.
But their terms have expired. There is a case out of Jersey City, which, again, bad facts make bad law. In Jersey City, they failed to appoint people to the planning board for something like 3 or 4 years, and the question was whether they are de facto officers, members,
and the court said yes, but then had cautionary language that essentially says, in the future, right, in order to discourage this type of conduct, planning board and board of adjustment members may not hold over. Okay, so.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out where I am in this whole picture.
Okay, my point is.
No, let me clarify where I am. So
the alternate to the board of adjustment, right? There's a vacancy. That was one of the ones you tabled.
Yeah.
And the regular member, class 4 member on the
Planning board.
Has been also vacant and tabled.
I guess the better question is that this is a special meeting and nominations is not listed on the agenda. Is it?
And that's another issue too, because obviously special meetings are designed to consider only those matters which are listed on the agenda. The Open Public Meetings Act has a provision that essentially other items may arise, and in fact most of our notices have that type of provision in it. But ultimately it's up to the council to decide what matters will or will not be admitted.
Okay.
Having said that, I will also tell you that you've also amended your rules to provide under council listed items, right? Where a council member may bring up virtually anything.
Now, let me make sure I know where I am, because it's hard to keep up with this stuff. We have reappointed everybody on the planning board that we interviewed, and we have reappointed the 2 alternates to the the 2 alternates to the planning board. We've reappointed them.
That is correct.
And at least 2 members of the zoning board, we reappointed them too.
You appointed the the regular position, but not one of the alternates.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so what Jason is saying is something altogether different.
No, not at all. Last week, appointments were made. They were seconded. There wasn't a majority of council. Based on the reading that you just made, that action was not in accordance with the statute. And what I'm simply saying is that we just...
Statute ordinance.
The ordinance.
The statute has no provisions about this at all.
Got it.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that we've just reappointed Ms. Jones as the first alternate, and I'm making a nomination that we also consider Ms. Jones for the permanent seat.
You want to nominate her?
Yes. So I would like to nominate Kimberly Jones for consideration for a permanent seat on the planning board.
No, I can second that.
Did we just break the law? I hate that. I mean...
Well, it's not listed on the agenda.
Okay, so is this a straw poll?
This is a special meeting.
Can we list it on the next week's agenda, nominations, so that I can...
Not next week, 7th, the August meeting.
You have a meeting on the 29th.
Why can't I ask that it be added to the 29th budget meeting?
If you want to add that, then I'll have to do a sunshine notice amending.
My question was, why can't I just simply ask that be added to next week's agenda?
You can ask for whatever you want, but the council is going to have to give me a majority to change the meeting of July 29th, which is solely for the purposes of budget discussion, because I have to give a sunshine notice to the public. They have to know 48 hours in advance what the council wants to discuss. So if you want to amend that meeting, then this is the time to do it.
Jamie, we had a discussion in closed session that we were going to amend the sunshine notice for the July 29th meeting to include a closed session, which had not been originally listed on the July 29th meeting. So I think there's already a sunshine notice notification that would be required.
He's requesting that nominees be placed. That's an open session item. So there's nothing to do with your closed session. It has to do with the sole purpose for the 29th is for budget discussion only. So if you want to amend your open session meeting to include the opportunity to nominate, I need the majority of council to be in favor of that.
I would like the majority of my council colleagues to support me in adding to next week's agenda nominations so that we can at least consider more than one individual for the open seat on the planning board. So my request is that
So you're making a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we add appointments to next week's agenda.
Appointments or nominations?
Nominations.
second that motion.
Okay. Councilmember Caskell?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Katz? Councilmember Pruitt?
No.
Councilmember Schwartz?
No.
Councilmember Solon?
Yes.
Mayor?
No, I won't be here.
Did not pass.
We are adding the closed session, Jamie. The closed
I
session.
believe the suspension
What
just
is the-
reflects that we're going to start. So.
What is the purpose of the closed session? What is the purpose of the closed session?
I don't have the discussion.
I thought it was limited to the interview of the two people that weren't there. That's what my
And
understanding
I
was.
thought it was for the 12th, August 12th.
Yes, because I won't be here on the 29th, so I want the interviews to take place.
It was August 12th.
Okay.
So in that case, I wouldn't have to amend anything because it's a regularly scheduled
Just,
meeting.
can I get some clarity on this since you're sitting right here? We are going to do interviews next week, and we are not going to open the
We're not
floor for
doing interviews
nominations?
next
No,
week.
you're not doing interviews.
Okay, so we're done doing interviews.
August 29th is solely for the budget.
Okay.
Okay, so August 12th is your regularly scheduled meeting on your annual council meeting schedule. There's no reason for me to amend anything because it is understood that you have your closed session meeting and you can list those items for discussion, and it's already been amended. The resolution that was scheduled for tonight has already been amended to transfer those interviews for August 12th. So July 29th is solely open session for your budget. There's no closed session.
And just keep in mind, the July 29th, the August 12th closed session agenda is a very heavy agenda.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, so we need to make sure and allot time. Yes. We need to make sure and allot time that we can get to everything that we need to get to, including the 2 interviews. And also 2 interviews, possibly 3 interviews for the alternate 4 of the Board of Adjustment.
On our agenda right now for August 12th, are we voting on members of the planning board?
On August 12th, you have the alternate number 1 member who was relisted for a resolution, an appointing resolution, not for nomination. There's already a nomination in effect. So this resolution that was proposed for tonight, I took that language out of there, and that's being rescheduled. So an appointing resolution for the Board of Adjustment, alternate number 1 member being Monica Monis, that's being relisted for the 12th. And then the same thing for Keith Kaplan for the Planning Board. So what you're doing is carrying that section of your resolution to your August 12th meeting. The nominations are already taken place. If you want to nominate again, the time and place to do that would be at your next regular meeting, which would be August 12th, which means that the proposed resolution would be on the following meeting after that.
But if we vote to fill the vacancy, there's no longer a vacancy. So there's no point in which a nomination can be made and that person can actually be considered. I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
What is your...
That's provided that the resolutions pass.
Right, I mean, if you're... I think his question is procedural, but I think you want to know if you nominate at one meeting or if there's just a vote that you can just eliminate a vacancy. That's just saying at any time.
No, I'm saying that if we're voting on filling the vacancy in the planning board on the 12th, because that's going to be on the agenda,
Can you speak to the mic? We can't hear a word.
You're relisting the nominations that you pulled from tonight to August 12th. If you are now interested in making a new nomination for something else where there actually exists a vacancy, you can make that nomination under new business on August 12th.
I understand that. We made a nomination in last week's meeting to
Right.
fill a vacancy on the planning board.
Right?
Now, we're going to wait until August 12th to vote on that nomination, and if we vote in the affirmative, then there's no point in making a nomination for anyone else to be considered. That's all I'm
If
saying.
there's no vacancy, no, there's no point.
Precisely. Which is why I made a motion to nominate Ms. Jones so that we could actually consider whether or not she was a viable candidate for the planning board, and then we could actually cast a vote on the 12th with 2 candidates being nominated. But since that's been voted down, there's really no question about who's going to be filling the vacant seat on the planning board.
That's assuming it's going to pass.
And you can also nominate on the 12th.
Jamie, I'm sorry, we have a planning board meeting this Thursday, so if we can just reach out to Ms. Jones and Mr. Thompson, especially since we're missing other people that that they're been appointed and we can use them on Thursday night.
They're going to contact me tomorrow. Take care of it. Okay.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Can I suggest that Councilman Castle just move the big hand just a little bit left of the 12 so we can fulfill our commitment?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? Lost record.
Sorry, I